Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Nicholas Bulens. I'm a program administrator at the Executive Office of Economic Development. And in this video, I'll be presenting on dredging construction grants, which are currently available through the fiscal year 26 round of the Massachusetts Dredging Program. This is a pre-recorded information session, so thank you for tuning in and for your interest in the program. The purpose of this video is to provide a walkthrough of the current rounds of RFP. I'll go over the agenda in just a moment, but I have two quick housekeeping items. First, a copy of this slide deck is available on Combis. Feel welcome to download it at any time. Second, because this is not a live recording, there's no Q&A portion to the presentation. However, the round has an open Q&A period during which any person can submit written questions. Responses will be publicly posted on Combis following the close of the Q&A period. I'll provide more details on the logistics for this at the end of the presentation. So let's dive in. Here's our agenda for today's video. We'll start with an overview of construction grants in the fiscal year 26 round, including some program background and general ABCs. Next, we'll talk about core requirements, followed by a walkthrough of the application process. We'll discuss the review process, as well as the evaluation criteria used to assess construction applications. Then I'll offer some helpful tips for applying and detail the written Q&A process. Lastly, I'll say a few words about the Seaport Economic Council Grant Program, which is a great resource for coastal municipalities, especially those who are still in the study or design phase of their dredging projects. Now, quick disclaimer, this presentation is not a substitute for reading the RFP. We'll cover the highlights of the fiscal year 26 round for construction projects, but we won't cover every nook and cranny. So for full details, please consult the RFP. In the event of conflict or discrepancy between this presentation and the RFP, the latter will control. The Mass Dredging Program is a standalone capital grant program launched in 2019. It is the first and still the only grant program in the Commonwealth to offer focused funding for saltwater dredging. It also offers this funding on an open, predictable, and competitive basis. The overarching goal of the program is to respond to local dredging needs that strengthen the Commonwealth's blue economy. Blue economy is partly a term of art, but for our purposes, we take a broad view of the topic. We define the blue economy as encompassing not just ocean-based commercial activities, such as fisheries and transportation, but quality of life activities like coastal recreation and tourism, as well as what communities need to make these activities possible, namely safe and healthy harbors. What's new for fiscal year 26? So for the first time, EOED will consider up to $500,000 in awards in the annual grant round for purchases of regional dredging equipment or equipment used in the delivery of saltwater dredging services to 2 or more coastal municipalities. Equipment grants have been awarded in the past, but they were distributed through a standalone round much later in the fiscal year. So this is the first occasion when both types of grants, construction and equipment, are being considered simultaneously. For this reason, we are releasing 2 pre-recorded information sessions. This current recording that you're listening to right now is intended for dredging construction applicants. For equipment grants, you'll want to check out our second recording, which is also available on YouTube. It's important that you consult the correct video because the general requirements, submitting an application, and award and evaluation information for equipment grants are distinct and provided for in Appendix A of the RFP. The second video walks you through the appendix, whereas this recording focuses only on dredging construction grants within the main body of the RFP. These are the basic who, what, and how of the fiscal year 26 construction grants. Who and what are eligible. Construction grants are available to coastal municipalities to support saltwater dredging. By construction, we mean the actual dredging of a site, the disposal of dredged material, and other general construction tasks associated with a public dredging project. How will awards be made? Construction grants will be competitively awarded with a focus on shovel-ready projects that contribute to the economic vitality, vibrant waterfronts, maritime safety, or ecosystem health of Massachusetts harbors. All Massachusetts coastal municipalities are eligible to apply, although there is a limit of 1 application per municipality. Projects for all types of saltwater dredging and disposal methods will be considered, including what we refer to as Federal Section 204 beneficial use projects. Only public tidelands are eligible for funding. This means that the dredging site cannot be privately owned, whether that ownership is by grant, lease, or license. In these cases, the site is considered privately held tidelands, and so the area is ineligible for public funding. The maximum amount that may be requested is 2.5 million per municipality. Joint applications, of course, have two municipalities, which means the total requested amount could exceed 2.5 million, provided this amount is justified by the project costs and supported by a 50% match. Overall, construction grants focus on shovel-ready projects that provide benefits in one or more of the following subsectors of the blue economy: economic vitality, vibrant waterfronts, maritime safety, and ecosystem health. Each year, I like to provide a snapshot of the program's impact. Since 2019, the program has funded 44 public projects. We've awarded over 27 million in grants, tapping into more than 33 million in local contributions. Projects have removed roughly 720,000 cubic yards of material, nearly half of which was used to rebuild public beaches and shorelines. To give you a sense of the magnitude of these numbers, 720,000 cubic yards is roughly equivalent to the volume of 218 Olympic swimming pools. Lastly, the program has sustained or strengthened harbors that collectively support 1,000 plus commercial vessels, more than 10,000 moorings and dockage slips, and over 70 harbor-dependent businesses such as boatyards and commercial marinas. Per the program's authorizing legislation, projects require a one-to-one cost share or a 50% match to be considered for funding. This match must consist of non-state funds, but those funds may come from multiple non-state sources, such as municipal bonds, federal grants, or private contributions. Very important, in-kind contributions and pre-grant contract costs are not eligible as matching funds. The applicant's match must be a cash equivalent comprised of non-state dollars. EOED expects that most, if not all, grants will be awarded for one fiscal year with a contract ending date of June 30th, 2026. However, contracts for 2 fiscal years will be considered for large-scale projects. Large scale in this context means the municipality can demonstrate the following. First, that the project cannot feasibly be completed in a single fiscal year due to the anticipated volume of dredged material and the time of year restrictions required by regulatory agencies. And secondly, that as a result of these factors, the project requires the grantee to bid and award a multi-year dredging contract to ensure uninterrupted construction and completion of the project. Allowable costs. In the RFP, allowable costs are covered in detail, but for the purposes of this presentation, these are the broad strokes. Allowable costs will generally include bidding, construction, and construction administration services deemed necessary, appropriate, and reasonable for completion of the project. EOED may choose to make awards only for selected costs. EOED may choose to make awards for less than an applicant's requested amount. In terms of what's non-eligible, meaning what you cannot use grant funds on, these include pre-construction costs. These are any costs associated with the study, design, engineering, permitting, or real property transactions of a project. So those are non-allowable costs. The anticipated start date for contracts awarded in the fiscal year 26 round is August 1st. Grantees will be required to submit all permits and drawings as part of their award, either before or after contracting at EOED's discretion. EOED may place conditions on any award commitment and require that these conditions be satisfied prior to contracting. All contracts will incorporate the terms and conditions of the RFP and associated appendices, any amendments thereto, and the grantee's commitment letter and any conditions therein. Lastly, for this slide, EOED may hold a minimum 5% of any award as retainage until the project is complete. The deadline. Applications must be submitted by March 21st, 11:59 p.m. Applications must be submitted online via EOED's submittable platform. So this is an online grant management platform with a login. No late submissions will be accepted. No email, paper, or fax submissions will be accepted. For preparation, municipalities can preview and download a copy of the application in Microsoft Word format on Combis. We highly recommend that you consult it. However, this copy is offered as a reference and preparation resource only. No submission of a Word document will be accepted as a formal application. The application is divided into 6 substantive sections. The project snapshot, this is exactly what it sounds like, a quick snapshot of what's being requested. Harbor and community profiles. Here you describe the characteristics requested for both the harbor and the community at large. Project profile. This section deals with the project location, need, scope, permits, and milestones. Cost and funding sources. This is mostly a cost summary table, but it also covers your match commitment and any pre-construction spending. Promoting the blue economy. This is your most substantive section. It's comprised of 4 subsections, each of which corresponds to one of 4 areas of the blue economy that we mentioned previously. So commercial fishing and boating, recreational boating and destinations, maritime safety, and ecosystem benefits and health. For purposes of evaluation, each subsection is equally weighted, which means no subsector has an inherent edge over any other. Lastly, preparing for success. This section deals first with the capabilities of the municipality to maintain the outcomes of the project, and second, it considers any imminent public or private capital improvements that may coincide with the project. 2 types of attachments, those required for all projects and those that are conditional. All applicants must submit a site plan. All applicants must submit copies of any permits issued to date, including associated plans and drawings. However, there is a waiver for past applicants who submitted permits in a prior grant round. In these cases, you are not required to resubmit, provided none of the previously submitted permits have expired and no modifications have been issued. If that is not the case, then the municipality must submit its renewed or modified permits, including their plans and drawings. If you're submitting a joint application, you'll need to include a signed statement from the CEO of the partnering municipality. Additionally, if you're requesting funds for a federal Section 204 beneficial use project, you'll need to submit either the project's feasibility or federal interest determination report. Both of those would have been prepared by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And finally, commercial partner letters, I apologize. If your project coincides with either piggyback dredging or capital improvements to a waterfront property, then you'll need to provide a commitment letter from that commercial property owner. This letter needs to include all the information outlined in the RFP and the application. All projects must be submitted using EOED's submittable platform, which is a 100% online application process. First thing to note is that each submitter or the person entering the application information needs to create a personal user account. This slide provides some screenshots of the process. You'll find the submittable link on the Dredging Program's How to Apply page. From there, look for the Submit button with the title Mass Dredging Program Fiscal Year 26 Construction Grants. You'll be prompted to sign in. If you're a new user, click sign up, and if you forgot your password, you can click forgot and follow the on-screen instructions. Once signed in, you'll be asked a yes or no pre-check question just to confirm that you're applying for dredging construction. Then, once you're past the pre-check, you will have officially started your application and you can save and return at any time. Here are the high-level steps for submitting an application. I'm not going to read each of them, but I will call out steps 5 and 6. When you're preparing to upload your attachments, we recommend that you save them in a common folder on your computer. And most importantly, you should label each file using the file naming system in the RFP. As you can imagine, the review panel has a lot of attachments to open, and it's extremely helpful for your project's review if attachments can be identified easily and quickly. A few notes about the mechanics of the online application. Some questions are conditional. They'll appear only if you select yes, no, or some specific answer, so read and consider your responses carefully. Additionally, watch for options that say select all that apply. Those selections matter. Throughout the application, you'll see icons that call out important details and guidance about what to include in your response. Read these very carefully as well. You'll also encounter several tables. All of these will auto-calculate as necessary. Lastly, most text boxes allow rich text editing, which means bullet points and other functions are available. Feel welcome to use them. And most text boxes will automatically expand so you can see your text at once. Award decisions. Applications will be evaluated based on the criteria and considerations specified in the RFP. The review panel will prepare a list of recommended awards subject to secretary approval and ratification by the governor and lieutenant governor. EOED anticipates emailing decision notifications by mid-June. Any award will be contingent on the successful execution of a grant contract. This contract will incorporate all conditions of the RFP and associated appendices, the grantee's commitment letter, as well as any conditions therein. Now I'll walk us through the evaluation criteria for construction grants. Very important, this presentation covers most, but not necessarily all evaluation criteria, so please consult the RFP in full. Additionally, please note that these are evaluation criteria, not eligibility criteria. In other words, these are the factors that the review panel will assess and weigh as part of the competitive evaluation process, but applicants are not required to meet these criteria to be eligible for consideration. This first set of criteria on the screen applies to Section 2 of the application. The review panel will consider the following: whether the municipality qualifies as a rural or small town, or whether the project is located in a housing choice community. Also, whether the applicant is an environmental justice community, also called an EJ community. We'll consider the variety of EJ populations in the community, as well as what percentage of your population resides in EJ census block groups. We'll consider your municipality's EQB per capita. This number is calculated by Mass DOR. It basically represents your community's total real estate property value divided by its population. Lastly, we'll consider the municipality's adoption or use of any state economic development tools community-wide. Now, the criteria discussed in the previous slide dealt with characteristics at the community-wide level. This slide deals with characteristics specific to the project harbor. Generally speaking, what we're measuring here is how much or to what extent the harbor operates as a community and economic resource for the municipality. For these purposes, the review panel will consider the following: whether the project is located in a designated port area, whether existing facilities and infrastructure are consistent with a developed harbor. By facilities and infrastructure, we mean physical assets and services in the harbor, such as boat ramps, moorings, dockage slips, marinas, boatyards, etc. The review panel will also consider the proximity and direct access to the harbor for environmental justice populations. Lastly, for this slide, we'll consider whether existing land uses and destinations at or adjacent to the harbor are consistent with an active public waterfront. So examples of land uses and destinations include beaches, parks, boat rentals, retail shops and restaurants, overnight accommodations, and so on. Project profile. The review panel will consider the number of fiscal years since the site was last dredged, the clarity and completeness of the project scope, as well as any need for phasing of the project if applicable. We'll also consider the strength of the project need based on existing conditions in the harbor and their impact on users and resources. Lastly, for this slide, we'll consider the project's shovel readiness, which we primarily measure via whether all ownership rights and permits are secured. So one question we hear often is whether permits must be secured at the time of application to be successful. The short answer is no. Whether permits are secured is not a litmus test for determining funding. However, given that these are predominantly one-year construction grants, the more permits in hand, the more competitive the project. And if the permits are not in hand, reviewers will consider how likely they are to be issued and when. Cost and funding sources. The review panel will consider whether the project match is secured and whether the amount of that match equal or exceeds 55%. That is, whether the match goes above and beyond the program's minimum. We'll consider whether the project builds on a dredging design and permitting grant awarded by the Seaport Economic Council. We'll also consider whether the municipality incurred 50,000 or more in pre-construction costs over the last 3 fiscal years, including the current fiscal year. Lastly, for this slide, the review panel will consider if and when the municipality last received a dredging grant from the Mass Dredging Program. As previously noted, Section 5 of the application is your most substantive section. It deals with benefits across the 4 subsectors of the blue economy. There are 2 things to note here. First, for our purposes of evaluation, each subsector is equally weighted, which means no focus area has an inherent edge over any other. Second, while projects that are strong in multiple subsectors will generally be more competitive, projects are not required to excel in all or any minimum number of subsectors. The program has funded projects in every subsector that you see here. For commercial fishing and boating, the review panel will consider the following: whether the project hosts one or more public offloading facilities for commercial catch, the strength of the project's existing commercial fishing, lobstering, or shell fishing based on its demonstrated magnitude and variety. And lastly, for this slide, the strength of commercial boating in the harbor based on the number and variety of vessels present. For recreational boating and destinations, the review panel will consider whether the harbor supports a region-wide boating public. Region-wide is the phrase there. This assessment is based on the capacity of the harbor's launch facilities, parking accommodations, and fees associated with parking. The review panel will also consider the project's support for an active public waterfront. This assessment is based on the magnitude and variety of recreational, community, and commercial destinations at or adjacent to the harbor. So to assist with your response here, the application provides a wide variety of example destinations. This slide shows several of them as well. So boat ramps, public parks, public beaches, mooring basins, marinas, boat rentals, boardwalks, restaurants, retail shops, public buildings, all are fair game in this subsection. The important thing to note from these examples is that they really run the gamut for both public and private destinations. So when you're demonstrating an active public waterfront, you can and should call out all the destinations that the harbor has to offer. Maritime safety. For this subsector, the review panel will consider the following: the level of risk to boating safety based on the number and frequency of reported groundings, support for public safety vessels based on the number and variety that regularly operate in the harbor, purchases of new or replacement public safety vessels by the municipality in the last 5 fiscal years, including the current fiscal year, whether the project coincides with imminent purchases of public safety vessels or equipment for those vessels. Examples of such equipment purchases could include outboard engines, side sonar imaging, or thermal imaging. Lastly, for this slide, the strength of improvements or sustained benefits for emergency responders, capability, and speed. The last subsector is ecosystem benefits and health. Here, the review panel will consider the following: whether the project includes the beneficial use of dredged material and the strength of any improved or sustained ecosystem benefits. Ecosystem benefits are defined as the benefits provided to a community or region through protection or restoration of its natural coastal ecosystems. What you'll see in the application is a list of 5 types of ecosystem benefits, and from this, you'll select all that apply and then provide explanation. These benefits are improved habitat, erosion mitigation, wetlands health, flood mitigation, and nutrients reduction. Additionally, the review panel will consider whether the harbor or an adjacent water body that empties into the harbor is listed as an impaired water body by Mass DEP, and that's going to be based on their 2022 final integrated list of water for the Clean Water Act. Lastly, for this slide, the review panel will consider whether the municipality has a comprehensive stormwater bylaw or a set of bylaws that meet the EPA and Mass DEP's stormwater management requirements. The last section of the application is preparing for success. Here, the review panel will consider the following: the project's anticipated lifespan based on how long before maintenance dredging will be required again, the strength of the municipality's local capabilities to maintain the outcomes of the project. This assessment is based on any comprehensive permitting, planning documents, and select revenue sources. Lastly, for this slide, the review panel will consider whether the project coincides with imminent investments in any of the following: improvements to public buildings, infrastructure of public space at or adjacent to the harbor, piggyback dredging, which is defined as dredging undertaken by a commercial property owner in coordination with the same dredging contractor as municipality, and capital improvements at one or more commercial waterfront properties. So to assist with your responses, the application does provide several lists and a wide variety of examples for all these improvements. Helpful tips. For every round, I like to offer tips that can help maximize the competitiveness of your application. First, complete all sections to the extent applicable. We can't evaluate what you don't answer. Respond completely to each question. Sometimes it can feel that you're repeating information, but that can be okay if doing so is what's needed to answer a question completely. To that end, be sure to read all questions carefully. Look for guidance about what to include in your response. We really try to be helpful in our instructions. Lastly, not all statements speak for themselves. So when asked and when feasible, support your statements with examples, numbers, or information from professional reports that you may have already available. Data and information resources. So in previous rounds, applicants asked where they could find data and information on the blue economy. This was a really great question, and our sister secretariats have published a variety of reports on the blue economy. So to assist, the RFP provides links to as many of these resources as I could find. They include harbor maps, fisheries and aquaculture, coast guides, travel and tourism, and more. Several of these resources are linked here on the slide. These links and others can be found in the RP. All references to resources are provided for information purposes and to assist applicants in preparation of their submission, so please feel welcome to utilize them. All right, the written Q&A process. General questions regarding the RFP will be accepted via electronic mail through February 21st, 2025, 11:59 p.m. Send questions to eohed.grants@mass.gov with subject line dredging RFP. EOED will respond only to general questions and reserves the right not to respond to any or all questions. Formal responses will be posted on Combis, and similar questions may be aggregated and answered via a single response. Lastly, I want to say a few words on the Seaport Economic Council Grant Program. This is a really great resource for coastal communities, which I encourage you to research if you haven't already. The SEC offers multi-year grants to coastal municipalities for a wide range of projects, including coastal infrastructure and economic development planning. SEC grants are offered only to coastal municipalities with a 20% match requirement and a $1 million max award. Most importantly, eligible projects include study, design, and permitting of future dredging. So this means if you're not ready to apply for construction to the Mass Dredging Program, the SEC could be a great funding source to prepare your project. Similarly, the SEC supports development of municipal harbor plans. These plans can be really powerful resources when preparing a mass dredging application. Among other things, they generate a lot of the same information that we ask about in our dredging applications. They're also one way of incorporating dredging into a local state-approved planning document, which is again something that we ask about in the application. Lastly, for this slide, SEC grants support design and construction of public buildings and infrastructure along your harbor. If you recall, one of our evaluation criteria is whether a dredging project coincides with other public investments. So here's a potential source of funding to help plan for these types of investments. With all that said, we are at the end of our presentation. Thank you again for tuning in, and we look forward to reading this year's applications.